Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely, and with me today is someone who I think needs no introduction to Gagglers. He's been a guest on the Gaggle before. He is Stefan Karganovic, who is the head of the Srebrenica Historical Project. Anyone who hasn't visited the site should do so immediately. There's a lot of fascinating documentary material about Srebrenica, the history, what happened, the forensic investigation, and so on. Absolutely invaluable historical resource. And so today, Stefan, I want to talk to you about an article that you published a few days ago, which I thought was an eye-opener, because you seem to be suggesting that Milorad Dodik, who is the current president of the Republika Srpska, which is the Serbian half of the Bosnia and Herzegovina, it has been indicted. He's likely to be arrested, and it could well lead to some kind of a NATO intervention in Bosnia and Herzegovina, kind of reliving the 1990s. So, Stefan, please explain what exactly is going on and how do we come to this moment in time?
Thank you very much for inviting me. Always a pleasure to be here. Well, the situation in Bosnia, specifically in the Republic of Srpska, is very tense. And it is tense because the long-time threats to deal with the Republic of Srpska, by decapitating its leadership, which amounts to Milorad Dodik, the current president, is coming to a head. And it seems to me, and all my contacts in Bosnia confirm that this is the most serious of these situations, which are recurring. Things get very complicated, very tense, and then there is a relaxation, and they go on as before until the next bump in the road. Well, this bump in the road is very serious because never before has any comparable move been made by what I will loosely call the international community, but we know what that stands for. Half a dozen or so countries, Western countries that aspire to pull the strings in Bosnia and rule it as a virtual protectorate or a vassal state. In their desire to acquire full control over Bosnia, and we're not talking about economic control, but strategic, political, especially in relation to current events in the Ukraine and the confrontation with Russia. So it is very important for them to confirm their absolute control. And the Dayton Peace Agreement is in the way because it provides for a loose confederation of the Croat Muslim section of Bosnia and the Serbian entity, the Republic of Srpska. That's one thing that does not work in their favor, because what they are looking for is a unitary state where they can install their people at the top and control it through their appointees. So that's a huge problem. The other huge problem is the mood in the Serbian entity, which is, as you can imagine, very anti-NATO and anti any changes in the constitutional arrangements that were put into effect in 1995 when the Dayton Peace Agreement was signed. Why should Serbs want any change? Because they, under the peace agreement, which also a section of it is the constitution of Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's a curious detail, but that is the way it is. Well, under
Stefan, I just wanted, if I could ask a question, because
Yes.
there's something about this that has, to be honest, puzzled me, because
Yes.
we have Dayton, and that's clear. You know, they set up these two entities, they created the constitution,
Exactly.
but then you had something else. You had a London conference, and then you had the Bonn conference, and then you had something called the Bonn Powers. So
Yes.
suddenly you kind of they changed Dayton and gave powers to this office of the High Representative that weren't really specified in Dayton. So how did that come about? How did this Bonn, this Peace Implementation Council, this Bonn conference, how did all that come about?
Well, the office of the High Representative was specified in Dayton.
Yes.
I believe that the original plan was for that office to last for a year or two. And then that was being extended year after year. Everybody got used to it, and nobody made an issue of it. Well, but the important thing in relation to the issue that we're talking about today is the fact that under the Dayton Agreement, the High Representative had to be confirmed by the Security Council of the United Nations. So all 5 permanent members of the Security Council had to agree that such and such an individual is duly appointed High Representative in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And his duties are really very narrow to oversee the implementation of the peace agreement. And let me remind you that the peace agreement was signed about a quarter of a century ago. So what is there to keep supervising? Presumably everything that had to be done has been done. And a long time ago, it was time for the office of the High Representative to be abolished. But the High Representative is an essential linchpin of Western control over Bosnia. Now,
and you had the High Representative who was fired. Who fired the president? I mean, there was that guy, Carlos Westendorf, who fired Poplassen. Yeah, okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But to understand how that came about, we have to mention the Bonn powers, alleged Bonn powers, and the meeting of about 7 or 8 Western countries. That was in 1997, and Russia was also included.
Yes.
But that didn't help the Serbs very much, for obvious reasons. It was Yeltsin's Russia which followed orders that did not come from Moscow, to put it very, very mildly. So the meeting in Bonn created a peace implementation council. Now, there is no mention of any peace implementation council or its authority, its powers in the Dayton Agreement. That was never enacted by the Security Council of the United Nations, which has the overall job of supervising the implementation of the agreements by which the war in Bosnia and Herzegovina was terminated in 1995. So it was a completely self-appointed private organization of states, paradoxical as that may sound, but it was a number of governments getting together and saying, we assume certain authority in relation to Bosnia and Herzegovina, and we shall henceforth act in accordance with that assumption of authority, which has no justification, no source in international law. It would be like you and I forming supervise the peace implementation process in Niger or something like that.
Right.
This group, which met in 1997 in Bonn, issued certain resolutions and assumed certain powers. One of the powers being to nominate and appoint the High Representative in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also to define, by broadening it, the authority of the High Representative. So, in legal terms, that is null and void, simply because you cannot delegate to somebody else the powers that you yourself do not have. So it's simple, it's an open and shut case. But again, let's remember the situation in the 90s. It was a unipolar world, and people who may have been unhappy by certain forms of behavior emanating from the West did not dare to make an issue of it. They just went along because there were no centers of power in the world that they could call on for support. They just had to go along. And the Serbs in Bosnia went along. At the same time, the West was busy interfering in the internal affairs of the Republic of Srpska by supporting certain elements and not supporting others. So their favorites were, in various ways, were pushed into positions of power.
Wasn't one of them Milorad Dodik himself? Because Poplassen was,
yes. And that is what I wanted to say next. He was made prime minister of the Republic of Srpska towards the end of the 90s. That was his first term in office as prime minister. And at that time, he had the reputation of a very pro-Western politician, one that was acceptable to the West and worked closely with its representatives. Something like Orban, who around that same time was a Soros protege, and his views were completely different from what they appear to be today.
Yeah.
So that is the general context. So we have a situation where this Peace Implementation Council nominates and effectively appoints the High Representative in Bosnia, who is given dictatorial powers, proconsular powers, in terms of the Roman Empire, and still the practice was that whomever they nominated, he would certainly be appointed, but the appointment still had to be confirmed by the Security Council of the United Nations. And so it went for 2 decades until the current alleged High Representative was nominated by the same Peace Implementation Council. But when they referred the nomination to the Security Council, that failed because Russia and China did not vote in favor of it, which automatically means that the confirmation failed. They went ahead, nevertheless, and they proclaimed that Christian Schmidt, I'm sorry, not Smith, he's a German citizen. They declared that he was, henceforth, that was two and a half years ago approximately, that he was the High Representative, succeeding Valentin Inzko. And
just to get a measure of these people, now his predecessor he was an Austrian, and
yes,
on the way out the door, he just proclaimed a new law which
The Srebrenica denial, yes, the
is a crime.
Srebrenica genocide denial law. That was his last.
His last step. Exactly. He just did it off his own bat, just like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, this is a good opportunity to mention that one of the powers that this self-appointed Peace Implementation Council gave to its protege, excuse me, the High Representative, was to impose and cancel laws in Bosnia and Herzegovina, to disqualify people from serving in public office, regardless of the fact that they may have been elected. That happened a number of times, that elected officials were simply thrown out of office. So you can have you get an idea of how broad the putative powers of this high representative are. He is a virtual dictator, and the elected structures and officials are but window dressing, because they can operate only at his pleasure and with his consent. And at any point, there are many precedents now. At any point, he can cancel anything that they do. It's cancel culture in Bosnia and Herzegovina long before it became fashionable in the Western world. So that's the situation. And so what we have now is an intensification of the witch hunt against the Republic of Srpska, and specifically Milorad Dodik, because he's the current president, he's perceived as a very hard nut to crack, as an individual who is completely uncooperative. He has formed a close alliance with Moscow, political alliance, and he also happens to be politically very close to Viktor Orban in Hungary. They understand each other very well, having much of their background being very similar politically. So this is not the first time that they are trying to restructure the political landscape in the Republic of Srpska, and specifically get rid of Dodik. But now it has become very serious, and my sources in the Republic of Srpska tell me that everyone there is taking it extremely serious.
So could you just tell us what triggered this? Because we know Dodik has been under sanctions by the United States. He's under sanctions by Brussels. This is an ongoing thing. What was it that suddenly triggered this current crisis?
Well, there's nothing that stands out that triggered it, other than Dodik's decision not to recognize officially Schmidt as the High Representative. He refuses to meet with Schmidt. He opposes everything that Schmidt does publicly. Schmidt tried to impose a law on property belonging to, that according to Dodik belongs to the entities, but according to Schmidt should belong to the federal state of Bosnia and Herzegovina. In other words, without going through any parliament, either the federal or the entity parliament, he simply decreed a law. And Dodik said no. All real property that is not personal in the Republic of Srpska belongs to the Republic of Srpska. It cannot be considered to be the property of the federal state of Bosnia and Herzegovina. So that was what directly triggered the conflict. And for a law to have effect on the territory of the Republic of Srpska, it needs to be published in the official gazette. So what Dodik did, he had the parliament adopt a regulation or a law directing the official gazette not to publish Schmidt's decree. So that is the nearest thing to the direct trigger in this particular case, but the tensions go back a very long time, and that is just the straw that broke the camel's back.
Isn't there also something about the Constitutional Court? Dodik just refuses to recognize the rulings of the Constitutional Court.
Well, the Constitutional Court is not provided for by the Dayton Agreement. That is another institution that was brought into existence by the decree of the High Representative, not Schmidt, but one of his predecessors. I think it was the British.
Ashdown.
Yes, Ashdown. Exactly. So that's another example of arbitrary conduct by the High Representative. Although Ashdown was duly confirmed by the UN Security Council, his official status is not in limbo, as in the case of Schmidt. Nevertheless, he exceeded the powers that the office of the High Representative had or has under the Dayton Agreement. So Dodik's contention is that all these decrees that are ultra vires are null and void, and including the Constitutional Court, because the entities have their own constitutional courts. Bosnia and Herzegovina was not set up as a unitary state, but as a confederation. So if there's a constitutional issue, refer it to an entity constitutional court. You don't need to set up a federal court of that nature. But of course, the idea is to construct, regardless and in contradiction to the provisions of the Dayton Agreement, of a federal centralized state with the intention of ultimately controlling it and subsuming both entities under that federal state.
And the Constitutional Court have 9 members. 3 of them are, don't even have anything to do with Bosnia and Herzegovina. They're just 3 international judges.
Exactly, they are foreigners.
That belong to the Muslim Croat Federation, and only 2
yes,
the Republic of Srpska. That already doesn't seem fair.
Exactly. And the presence of foreign judges in Bosnian courts is another indication of the view which the international community has of Bosnia as a country that is incapable of governing itself. So it needs the tutelage of foreign experts, quote unquote, to make its institutions work. Well, that is nonsense, of course, but it is just another control mechanism that has been imposed. And that is not part of the Dayton Agreement either. It is a post-Dayton imposition.
So now, as you described it, an arrest warrant has been issued against Dodik, or he's been indicted. I mean, what's the situation?
The arrest warrant has not been issued yet, but he has been indicted for undermining the constitutional.
Who indicted? By whom? But who indicted him?
By the state court, the court that we just mentioned a few minutes ago, whose legitimacy is in doubt, because it was arbitrarily set up by the High Representative. There is no legal grounds for the existence of that court, and needless to say, its conduct is completely outside the law, strictly speaking. So, on a criminal referral by Schmidt, this putative high representative, the court indicted Dodik for disrespecting the constitutional order of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Right now, we're waiting for the confirmation of that indictment, but I have no doubt that it will be confirmed. And the next step will be, of course, to name the judges who will handle the trial and to schedule the trial itself. It is just a hypothetical scenario, but I think that it is completely realistic that they are not going to wait for the trial to actually start and for the legal proceedings to be completed, because when you have a trial, you have a verdict, you have an appeal that can last for a while. Even though they will pull all the strings to expedite it, it still cannot be accomplished in a matter of days or weeks. It's going to be months, maybe into the next year. And they are in a hurry to get rid of Dodik. So they have a perfect rationale for issuing an arrest warrant, because Dodik said after the legal proceedings against him were started, that should Schmidt issue another, in his view, illegal decree, Dodik will do the same thing. He will go to the National Assembly of the Republic of Srpska and ask the Assembly to vote to annul Schmidt's decree. So we have there an open public admission that he is prepared to repeat the offense for which he's being indicted, and that is technically a rationale for arresting him, so that he wouldn't repeat the same offense or influence witnesses.
Who actually who carries out the arrest? I mean, you have the state authorities in Republic Srpska, you have the state authorities in the Federation. Who actually would carry out the arrest of Dodik?
That's a very sticky question. Of course, ultimately, the Sarajevo authorities would be in charge of carrying out the arrest, but I think that they would try to get the police authorities of the Republic of Srpska to do it. I anticipate that the local police authorities would refuse to comply with this directive. So Sarajevo, or the institutions on this federal level, will probably ask NATO to help with its personnel. There are some NATO troops in Bosnia, not very many, but there are some. And of course, they can always bring in more without asking anybody for permission. So in that scenario, things will become very, very complicated, because the people in the Republic of Srpska, regardless of whether they favor Dodik and his policies or not, as a matter of principle, they are very opposed to this brutal interference in their internal affairs. So there may be violence. And if violence breaks out, it is anybody's guess which way it will go.
Right. Now, you really think that NATO would consider basically, I mean, NATO's not in a good position right now with Ukraine and everything. So this would somehow be almost like nostalgia hour, you know, hey, we had all this success in the 90s. Maybe we can just pull this off, you know, do what we did to the Serbs back in the 90s. Let's just simply liquidate this Republika Srpska. Nobody likes it anyway, except for
Yes.
Orban. And then
Yes.
we'll once again congratulate ourselves. We did it. We beat the Serbs.
Exactly. I think that is their reasoning, plus the potential opposition physical opposition that they're facing in the Republic of Srpska on the governmental level is very limited, because in 2006, and that's another example of the High Representative at work, the Republic of Srpska and the Federation were ordered to abolish their separate military forces. So the Republic of Srpska doesn't have an army. It has a police force, but I think that it would be no match for NATO, even for a limited NATO intervention if they chose to take that path.
Right. Again, that wasn't in Dayton. There's nothing in Dayton about a joint army. There's absolutely nothing there that they.
No, there's nothing about. On the contrary, what Dayton explicitly provides for is that both entities shall keep their separate armed forces.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was changed by decree of the High Representative at the time.
Yeah. Now you came up with a proposal, a very intriguing proposal. You said, well, Republika Srpska doesn't have its own army, so how about getting on the phone to Prigozhin, wherever he is,
not to Prigozhin. I'm not sure what Prigozhin's status is.
Yeah, no, all right. Well, yeah, okay, come on.
To the legitimate representatives of the Russian government. That's right.
That's a more difficult one, I think, because if it's a legitimate representative of the Russian government, I think the Russian government would find it difficult to get involved in the Republika Srpska. I mean, first of all, it's got its hands full at the moment in Ukraine. On the other hand, a mercenary force under contract, why not? I mean, they just they're there, they're guns for hire. I mean, if Niger can ask Wagner Group to come in and help, why not Republika Srpska?
Mali and several other Western African countries. Exactly. So could the Republic of Srpska, in my view, although my preference would be for that to be blessed by the legitimate authorities of the Russian Federation, if it ever came to that. I don't know what legal mechanisms they would use to separate the Wagner Group from the Russian government. I think some mechanisms of that sort are in place already. But I think for the impression to be made on the international community and to dissuade them from attacking the Republic of Srpska, it is very important to send a message that if Wagner comes to the Republic of Srpska, it is not going to be in opposition to the wishes of the Russian government.
Right. Well, they probably wouldn't be in opposition, but I find it hard to believe that the Russian government would want to get itself into a confrontation with NATO in the Republika Srpska. I mean, they're already in a confrontation in Ukraine, whether they would want to. But if it's an army under contract, then they say, well, they're private citizens. We don't control what private citizens do. I mean, they just they go wherever they're invited. And I think that's
yes, exactly. Well, that would probably be the official rationale. But I'm saying that there are informal ways of making it known that such a scenario was not happening just as a result of a private deal between Dodik and the person that I mentioned, who is also a private individual in the final analysis, but that it has the official approval, or that it is not in opposition to the policy of the Russian government.
How like do you think that's a possibility? Do you really think that the Republika Srpska would invite in Wagner Group? Do you think that that's a possibility?
I think there is a very slim chance of that, because if you look at Dodik's political behavior, I don't know to what extent he's familiar with ancient history, but I would make a parallel between him and the Roman general Marcus Fabius Cunctator, who led Roman troops in one of the Punic Wars, and who was famous for acting with extreme caution and never really undertaking any moves that were brusque or would in any way expose himself and his troops to excessive risks. Well, that is essentially Dodik's mode of behavior also. And he does not have a history of making bold moves. And this would be, I think, a very risky adventure in his view. And I don't think that he really has what it takes to do something like that. But the Republic of Srpska leadership will have to seriously consider a strategic response to the pressure that it is experiencing. Because what is under threat is not just the freedom of one man, Milorad Dodik, but the existence of their state, of their government. And I think that the Western coalition, the collective West, as they are called, now see a golden opportunity to finish the job in Bosnia by eliminating the Republic of Srpska. And of course, decapitating its leadership is one of the main tactics that they're using. There is a reason for that, and it is, I think, related to the events in the Ukraine. And it's a very similar rationale which Hitler had in 1941 when he was pressuring the Kingdom of Yugoslavia to join the Axis. He simply wanted, he knew that he was going to have a confrontation with the Soviet Union, and he wanted his rear in the Balkans to be safe, to be completely under his control. So we have an analogous situation today. Serbia, the country of Serbia, and the Republic of Srpska as an entity in Bosnia and Herzegovina are not under complete control. And in the case of the Republic of Srpska, the government is very much aligned with Russia. In the case of Serbia, it is not. But in both countries, the people are overwhelmingly supportive of Russia. And that is a problem. So I think that the ultimate goal, and that has to be accomplished very soon, is to put both Serbia and the Republic of Srpska under the reliable control of local vessels.
Yeah, absolutely right. What as far as the Muslim Croat Federation is concerned, they regularly say, yeah, we want to join NATO. We want to be
exactly.
in
NATO. And the reason Bosnia is not a member of NATO is because the Republic of Srpska has veto power under the Dayton Agreement. So that's another reason, another example why the political situation in Bosnia has to be restructured.
Right. What about try to segue a little bit? What about Vučić and Serbia? I mean, they're obviously applying a lot of pressure on Vučić. they want him more or less to accept Kosovo independence and to change his position on Russia, join
Exactly.
the EU.
Exactly.
Can Vucic hold out, or is he going to just basically?
Well, my personal opinion is that it is only a matter of time, and all the informal arrangements have been made for both things to happen in Serbia. The Kosovo issue has largely been settled to the West's satisfaction, thanks to the cooperation of the Serbian government. As for sanctions being imposed on Russia, preparations for that are being made as we speak, and chances are that by the fall, some form, these sanctions will be imposed. Of course, they will be symbolic because there is no significant trade involved, but the symbolism is going to be strong, it's going to be devastating, because here we have a country that everybody knows is absolutely on Russia's side. I'm talking about the people. And its government imposes sanctions on Russia. So that is going to be horribly demoralizing. And the symbolism that is inherent in such a step terrible.
Why is Vucic doing this? I mean, as you say, the Serbian people are supportive of Russia, so there's no political advantages. I mean, I understand he's getting threats from Brussels, from Berlin, and so on, but there's a limit to what they can do. Or is there something more that they can do to him?
Well, I don't know exactly all the things that they can do, but apparently they have their channels of influence. And don't forget that he was brought there with the understanding that he would accomplish certain tasks. And the tasks that we just mentioned are very important on that list. They have their ways of controlling their young leaders.
But listen, it's very interesting because, when you read the Western media about Vucic, they invariably bring up Milosevic and say, hey, well, Vucic used to work for Milosevic. And so, hey, Milosevic committed the worst crimes ever known to humanity. Therefore, Vucic is implicated in those crimes. So you have to wonder, is there, some kind of an indictment that they can slip out of their pockets? We forgot to invite you.
Exactly. But it's not just the association with Milosevic. That was 2 or more decades ago. It's the things that the current regime has been implicated in since 2012, since it was installed in Serbia. And I think that is much more serious. And it's probably completely documented. And they know that this evidence can be made public.
What are you referring to? I mean, what you're referring to?
Well, I'm referring to things that in the U.S. We talk about in relation to Biden and his crew.
I see.
Criminal behavior.
Right. But it's also interesting. I mean, I'm sure that that's right, that the very last act of the ICTY was to find guilty Sinovic and Frankie Simatovic for crimes in Bosnia and Herzegovina. That was really the first and only time that they actually found Serbian government officials guilty of crimes committed in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I think that was really the last kind of gasp of the ICTY. So that's a kind of an interesting, again, whether that's something you can just wheel out at some point in the future. Hey, we've got you for crimes committed outside of your territory.
But I doubt that the crimes of the 2 people that you mentioned can be attributed
Vučić.
to Vučić. I mean, they can do anything. You can write any kind of indictment. Your imagination is the limit. But and of course, if you control the judicial mechanism, they'll confirm and approve anything that you have written. But that would be a bit outlandish. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So just returning then to Bosnia and Herzegovina, so you see that there's a crisis that's coming to the boil within the next couple of weeks, months?
Exactly. Well, I think the next couple of weeks will be highly indicative, and if my prediction that an arrest warrant will be issued on Dodik comes to fruition, I think that will be a sure sign that the crisis is entering a very serious stage, because they'll have to act on that warrant, and that won't be simple.
Right.
It is going to, whatever they do, whatever option they choose, it is going to generate enormous opposition within the Republic of Srpska. The police force, which is the only effective force that the Srpska government has to oppose such a move, is not of any great consequence. But if tens of thousands of people surrounded the office of the president and barred the way of NATO forces, which came to arrest him, that would be a very explosive situation.
And you think that that would come to pass? Tens of thousands of people would come and fight for?
Yes, absolutely. I would not exclude that possibility, because the people there, according to what I hear, are bitter, and even those who are not Dodik champions see this correctly as an attack primarily on the Republic of Srpska, on their country. And I think there's going to be many people who are going to come to the defense of what they hold very dear, which is their autonomy, their freedom.
Right. Well, there's no question. I mean, as you said, pretty much the entirety of the European continent is NATO. I mean, it's NATO. Everything belongs to NATO.
Well, they're not going to have a PR problem in Western Europe. That's
right.
For sure.
Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Those are the two islands that have resisted incorporation into NATO.
Exactly. And they are going to expend enormous efforts to correct that situation in the near future.
That's right. All right, Stefan, this was a really fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for giving us your time. Very, very insightful as always. And we look forward to a next conversation. I mean, if this crisis develops along the lines you suggested, which I agree with, I think we're going to have more to talk about. So thank you,
I'm sure
Stefan.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good luck.
All the best.
And I really congratulate you on your work. I follow it intensely. And my mother does too. She's a great fan.
Well, we wish her all the best. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.